much, Denisse. That was amazing, absolutely fascinating. Endless opportunities, possibilities, but also risk. So whilst the crew have a few moments to think of their most burning questions, can I go ahead? Is that okay?
Please do. And yes, please, anybody, I should have said at the beginning, if you have any questions, I will do my best to answer them. But we'll see. Please ask away.
Well, that's the beauty of this, right? It's evolving the whole time, so we have just time will tell. We're talking about the future here. So, my first question is that we spent yesterday talking about a lot about kleptocracy, and of course, very important day yesterday and today, whilst we see things unravel in Ukraine and with Russia. So, what kind of a role do you think that cryptocurrency is currently playing? What should we really be aware of?
So they play a role. They kind of can play a role on both sides of the fence, if that makes sense. So on the one hand, it has been used by individuals and countries that have authoritarian regimes to basically hide their wealth and to send money abroad and to not have it monitored. So I think there was a community of individuals in Iran for a while that were using that to kind of hide that. On the other hand, I'm not sure if you've been seeing the news stories that basically say Russia is going to be using cryptocurrencies to evade all of the sanctions that are being put in place against it at the moment by predominantly Western countries and European countries. But again, and it isn't that hard to bust sanctions using cryptocurrencies because you just, if there's a wallet that's been set up by or that has been designated, 5 minutes you have a new wallet. So you can just kind of transfer funds transfer value very, very quickly. That said, that value can then be followed on the chain. So a lot easier to identify where those funds have gone to. The other thing I will mention is, at least with central bank digital currencies, there's definitely a bit of a concern that banks are going to be able to kind of, if they do due diligence on individuals or the central bank, governments are going to be able to marry up the financial health and the finances of an individual with kind of who they are, and then also be able to control their funding and financing at some point in time. So there's definitely a risk with that. And I think it's just, so there's also human rights implications around that. There's issues around privacy and data privacy issues and concerns. And there's also the threat and the fear that some of these cryptocurrencies, and especially central bank digital currencies, could be used to carry out mass surveillance of individuals. So there's some risk, there's some concerns.
Absolutely. And we have Rajneesh here asking, what tools do you recommend for that could be used for investigating crypto? So you will share with us kindly your slide, and I can circulate this to the crew afterwards.
Yeah. And I think it's, so doing cryptocurrency investigations is a little bit different than doing kind of traditional investigations using open source intelligence and things like that. But also, I have seen it is possible. They do look different. So it's just kind of making sure that you open your mind up to that. There is a lot of code. There is a lot of kind of hash things like that need to be looked at as well. So it's just worth looking, or just kind of keeping your mind open about that. And also there are a lot of experts who are available to kind of talk and explain and share. And, the guys at Elliptic Chainalysis, TRM Labs, again, Cypress Rays, I know that they work closely with some investigative journalists as well. So. Mm-hmm.
Awesome, thank you. Your question. Last two crypto transactions, what's the new information? That's a difficult one, it depends.
So I think it's, they can be traced. They've always been able to be traced because they're on the blockchain. So once you, I think that the challenge has always been connecting, like without kind of due diligence or KYC, kind of you have a transaction going from a black box to a black box, and trying to figure out who owns that black box and who owns that black box has been the kind of the biggest challenge. But as we're getting more kind of due diligence being carried out, and also you have new technologists that are using new data points to be able to kind of offer services out there in terms of to make it easier for law enforcement to trace these transactions, and not only trace the transactions, but trace them back to a particular individual or whatnot, is, I think, really, has been key. The question around kind of the environmental impact of cryptocurrencies. So yes, there is a massive kind of impact on the environment in terms of the amount of energy that's used. And I mean, I can't remember which country it was, but they were looking at setting up mining centers in their country, but because the amount of energy used was so much, it actually shut down a couple of towns for a week or two or something like that. So then they decided that they had to change their strategy as a country to not allow mining to happen. So there are definitely some massive environmental issues. That is probably one of the biggest risks for in terms of kind of wider scale adoption. Like what happens if somebody just shuts the power off? But it is one of the big, in terms of whether it's being localized to the least developed countries, a lot of the miners, I mean, it has to be in a country that has kind of stronger low cost of energy. So I know Kazakhstan was one of the countries that had a lot of miners that originally moved out there. But then because there were all the power failures and issues with kind of electricity maintenance and things like that, I mean, they're still there. And the cost of moving to different countries is very, very cumbersome and very heavy. So it tends to be, there has to be some level of infrastructure and energy infrastructure for it to become a little bit more attractive, if that makes sense. So there are a number of countries that have been doing their dedicated money laundering risk assessments, or that are in the process of doing their money laundering risk assessments. So the typologies, I would again look at companies such as CipherTrace, Elliptic, TRM Labs, and Chainalysis to pick up on some of the typologies. In terms of cryptocurrency use in corruption cases, I'm always kind of trying to keep my eyes and ears open for that. But because a lot of, like, if you're thinking about grand scale corruption, if you look at I don't want to say age of some of the individuals, cryptocurrency, there has been more mainstream adoption by millennials and things like that. I think it's been easier to just open up an offshore account and move money that way than it has been to necessarily open up a wallet online and try to move, billions of dollars by buying that amount of cryptocurrencies. Also because there are people who are whale watchers. If mass amounts of Bitcoin or Ethereum or something like that is being purchased in a particular by a particular wallet that is then traced to a particular jurisdiction, then that tends to be called, I would imagine that would be called out. But a lot of examples are, they're still linked to cybercrime. They're still linked to ransomware. It's linked to, traditional forms of financial crime. And a lot of people say, oh, well, it's new types of crime. And I'm like, well, no, like if you're okay, this is my own opinion. I'm like, it's black market crime, right? So just because the black market is now on the web doesn't, we still have black market purchases. So it's, the way I think of it is just, it's the same kinds of crime, still laundering drugs, still trafficking humans, still trafficking arms. All of that is now just being paid by some sort of a digital, might be paid by a digital asset or gold, right? Like there's different ways. In terms of which has the potential for more illicit finance, crypto or e-money by central banks, That's an interesting question. I think it depends on how the central bank digital currencies are being issued and the monitoring around it, and whether they know what's going, because it's still so early, I would say. Like, I'm not sure whether, I still don't know whether the central bank digital currencies are all on blockchain, or if they're just, again, kind of digital representations or more kind of mobile type of thing. So that's something to, whenever people think always talking about crypto and then CBBDCs, I'm kind of like, yeah, but how are they issuing this money? Is it all on blockchain? The energy costs of that are in like astronomical. So, yeah, I'm going to sit on the fence for that one. I would say they both have potential. Criminals. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for that lovely comment. Paula, we can't hear you. Do you want to type it in? But I am enjoying the chat, and I love that people are collaborating in chat. We still have 7 minutes, so please ask anything you want. I think something that I thought was really interesting was I was surprised by the level of adoption in Nigeria. Nigeria, I think, is one of the top countries that has like one of the highest levels of adoption of digital or cryptocurrencies in the world. So like a third of Nigerians own cryptocurrency. So that's, yeah. Oh, the question, what do you think we're going to see in the next 5 years? Okay. Oof. That's, let me get my crystal ball out and see. I think there's going to definitely be a lot more mainstream adoption. And that's because you're already seeing it, but safer adoption. So probably we're already seeing a lower trend in terms of kind of regulated cryptocurrency and crime. I think we're going to definitely see more cybercrime. Again, continued kind of risk between cybercrime and cryptocurrency, possibly state-led, just because of what's happening at the moment. So I think that's definitely something to maybe kind of keep in mind. El Salvador is not the only country that has, I mean, they're the first that have adopted Bitcoin, but there are other countries that are considering adopting legal tenders. What I think was really, really interesting in Myanmar, the opposition government has been using crypto to do fundraising for, and also kind of to finance some of the work. And that's definitely something I want to learn a little bit more about. But when I heard about that, and I thought that was really, really interesting. Definitely more institutional adoption because of the explosion in value, right? Like banks are in it to make money. So that means you're gonna, yeah. And once you start getting more regulation, that means that volatility is kind of hopefully gonna, at least there's more protection, or maybe more the perception of more protection. There isn't protection. Once you lose your funds in your wallet, it's gone. You might be able to trace it. Getting it back will be hard, unless you know who's kind of taken it, or if it's gone off wallet or off chain or something like that. I think there's going to be continued fraud and more criminality in DeFi, decentralized finance, just because it is, again, the potential for the amounts of money to move within that sector are so great, and criminals tend to go to the new way of financing, the new way of moving money. That's being, that's not necessarily being looked at. Some of it could just be opportunistic fraudsters. Some of it could be bots, right? Like a lot of activity is being done, or criminal activity is actually being done by robots or bots and pieces of software that are just programmed to attack and to take. So I think that's something that's really, really interesting. And then Web3, the creation of the metaverse and Web3, and the idea that, the continued interaction between, I mean, I remember when I first got Pokemon Go for my son, and the idea of looking at my phone and trying to catch a Pokemon in the real world using my phone as a lens to give me a view into a different kind of world that's a combination of a computer world and the real world was, a bit mind-blowing. But there are a lot of people who live in their avatars, and there are a lot of people who are investing into this space. And actually, I just saw somebody in Canada who's they opened up their anti-money laundering advisory office in the metaverse, which is just crazy, but really, really interesting. Do we have any more questions? And I guess since I have two more minutes, what I will say, and I said this to Paula, I love working with, I love the work that you guys do. I admire the work that you guys do. So I am, happy to answer questions and be available for support, just because I think the work that you do is so important, especially kind of the world that we're living at now. So just putting that out there. Thank you.
And anti-money laundering. So really exciting to hear a little bit more about crypto. And this is something I think Paula probably mentioned. I missed the beginning. Is probably it's something that we haven't been working so much as a movement, but there is a lot of appetite across our national chapters to do more work. So we probably should organize another session of this one also with our chapters across the movement. But yeah, so I'm on behalf of Paula, just wanted to thank you for joining us, and also everyone participating. And Paula, what else you want me to say? Really much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.